And when we talk about callings, we described this last week. And I'll just tell you, in my life, my callings, they go something like this. My first calling is to my God, and I follow Him with all my heart, mind, soul, and strength. As best I know how to do that, I lean into that. That's my first calling. My second calling is to be a husband to Becky. My third calling would be a father to Seth and Hannah. And those callings matter, and there's an order there, and it's on purpose. Because my marriage matters to my kids, and it needs to be in order. It needs to be in order for my kids. It's the greatest gift that I could give to my kids, is a healthy marriage. And so my marriage, though, needs my relationship with God to be right on track, because that's the only way it's going to be healthy and thriving. And then it just continues to trickle down into all of these different layers. They all start to line up together. And then my calling to this church. And I know that you may have been in churches, you may have heard pastors say, or they seem to insinuate that their calling to the church was above all these things, and they're wrong. I'll just flat out say it. They're wrong. Because if my marriage is not intact, if my marriage is not thriving, the scriptures are very clear in the New Testament that takes me out of being the pastor of this church. Of course, no one is perfect. And I am certainly not. But when we have a healthy marriage, then we can pastor in the church. But you know as well as I do, if my marriage was toxic, it would not be healthy for me to be leading this church. And we know that, and we need to recognize that. Therefore, my marriage has to come first. And that's why when I asked Becky to marry me that very night, I told her, I said specifically, I am committing to this calling on my life. And if at some point my calling to pastor this church and my calling to you as your husband, if they cannot exist together anymore, my choice will be to be your husband. And I'll go do something else. But I know that we can do both as we are aligned with Christ. And of course, that's where we're at, and we're excited to do it. But we need to know that, because that order matters. And I was so excited last week to have people coming to me after the services and saying, you know what, I need to go get some things in order. There's some conversations I'm going to have. There were conversations already started with husbands and wives as they were walking out the doors, because we prayed with them before they walked out the doors. Guys, this is where we're at. We need to take this seriously, because your life, healthy, thriving, it matters, and you need to know what these things are. And so you have callings in your life as well. Maybe you're not called. Maybe you're not called to marriage. You're like, I'm single. I'm not called into marriage. And very often we think of that as, well, I'm just void of that calling. No. You actually have a calling to singleness. Singleness is a calling. In fact, you might be shocked to hear, but Paul the Apostle, when he talked about marriage and singleness, here's what he said. He said, I wish that you were as I am, single. Because if you were, you would be single-minded in following Christ, and you would not be divided in your heart and in your responsibilities to your spouse. I wish you were like me. I wish you were like me. But here's the thing. There's some of us who we're single, and we're saying, no, it doesn't feel like a calling at all. I want you to know, push into it, because it is. And God can use it in an incredible way. And yes, maybe one day you will be married, but you could be healthy and thriving and full of joy in your life as you're pursuing the calling of singleness. Wherever you find yourself today, lean into that calling and allow God to bring incredible health to it. Is this making sense to us, church? We've got callings in our life. When we look at Gideon, he was called to be a hero, and there was a calling here. He already got his house straight. He got his house right. He said, "It's for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." He was following after Joshua's declaration. We've already seen that happen in the earlier part of this chapter. And now he is fulfilling the calling nationally that he's been called to by God in order to save Israel. But there's three common enemies that we've already seen in the passage. They're common to Gideon, they're common to us. And here's what they are. Number one, confusion. Here he is in this situation. We're going to see this right now as we step into this story of the fleece. Which way is up, for crying out loud? I have absolute confusion. Number two, it's chaos. Things are out of control. He wants to bring order to it, but he can't, because this isn't something he can bring order to. It's something God's going to have to bring order to, but God will, as Gideon follows Christ. As Gideon follows after the heart of God. So we see confusion, we see chaos, and we see fear. I think all of us understand these three enemies. He's fearing the worst case scenario. I don't know why it is, but I don't need faith to go that far to the worst case scenario. It seems like I am so easily drawn all the way to the extreme of the worst case scenario. That's like the easiest thing to imagine. And God says, you know what? You don't need to fear worst case scenario. That's why I'm in your life. That's why I've stepped into your life, so it doesn't have to go there. You're not going to deal with worst case scenario as you're following my lead. And these three enemies, we can overcome them. Chaos, confusion, fear,